Welcome back, ghouls and goblins. I hope you're having a magical day. Thank you so much for taking the time to support the channel. I don't know if you heard, but Meathook was banned from Standard. Ooh-wee. So what will we do to control the field from these pesky aggro decks? In today's video, we are going to look through all of the different colors for said field wipes, exploring different options, talking about pros and cons of each of them. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It really does help support. Let's go find ourselves some field wipes. Here we are, and of course, if I have missed any field wipes within this video, do not hesitate. Leave those down below in the comments, right? Because, there's a lot of them. They're all with different keywords, so it is a lot to go searching for within our collection. But I do believe we have found the majority, if not all of them. We're going to start out within white and work our way through. Temporary lockdown for 3 and enchantment. So not a permanent wipe, but it will do it temporarily. When it enters the battlefield, exile each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less until it leaves the battlefield, at which point your opponent will receive all of those 2 or less mana valued permanents. Tokens will be exiled forever. Obviously, a token can't exist in exile, so it just disappears and ceases to exist. This is fantastic. However, on the opposite side of that spectrum is if your opponent had any enter the battlefield or even leave the battlefield effects, that could maybe not be super beneficial for you, as now you're providing them with a little extra value if they're able to deal with it. So I like temporary lockdown. It's very cheap. It's easy to play early on, and it has a fairly decent impact, especially against those aggro decks. So maybe we throw this in with a later field wipe that's a little bit more expensive that can clean up the field as a whole. But again, a good sign in any control deck moving forward, I believe, is going to be that temporary lockdown. I like it a lot. I also don't mind to populate for 4 sorcery speed. Each player who controls a multicolor creature card will draw, and then will destroy all creatures. Just a standard field wipe. It's not a Doomscar. It can't be foretold. Foretelling is nice because it can dodge, discard. You also got the mana cost reduction, which is quite nice sometimes. However, depopulate's just that middle ground where it's cheaper than 5, but you're not going to get it down to 3, and potentially you're going to give your opponent a draw. So it's getting the job done in a similar fashion. Just destroy all creatures. I think this is really good, and Meathook definitely reduced the play that Depopulate would have seen in the past, I believe. By invitation only, for 5 mana, sorcery speed, choose a number between 0 and 13. Each player sacrifices that many creatures. So pros and cons, there's not many pros other than the fact that if you had a wider field than your opponent, don't have to remove your entire field state, which is really cool if you are going wide. So it's a wipe that you can use as an aggro or a go wide based deck, which is a lot of fun. That's the only pro about this card, because it's expensive, and what if they control more than 13 creatures, right? Heaven forbid. If they do, you're probably in a world of hurt already, right? But it's an interesting card for those who are looking to kind of play both sides of the fence, and I like that. Farewell for 6. Oh my gosh, just forget this card even exists. As soon as Meathook got banned, Farewell just started chuckling nervously in the corner. For 6 mana, sorcery speed, choosing 1 or more. Exiling all artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and or graveyards. Everything but planeswalkers, which is pretty ridiculous, and lands, of course. But Farewell is a fantastic card, and we've seen it a lot before, and we're going to see it even more now, without a doubt. Vanquish the Horde for 8 at sorcery speed, costing 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield, destroying all creatures. Again, this is not bad if you have creatures with access to indestructible, because then we're reducing the cost of it for our creatures and our opponent's creatures, right? Because we don't want to cast it if they don't have any creatures. So, massive reduction down to 2 if there's 6 creatures in play. Not unachievable by any means. So that's a very nice and cheap field wipe. And again, if you have indestructible, not only reducing the cost of it, but keeping your creature, which is really cool as well. So I love Vanquish the Horde. I think that's going to see a lot more play. That is all we have, I believe, for white to control the entirety of the field. Into blue now, which doesn't really have a lot of options. Consuming Tide. This is a quasi field wipe, if you ask me. For 4 mana, sorcery speed, each player chooses a non-land permanent they control, and then return all non-land permanents not chosen this way to their owner's hand. Then you draw a card for each opponent who has more cards in their hand than you. So they will get to keep one of their non-land permanents, and then everything else gets bounced to their hand, right? So pro, it's not just dealing with creatures, it's dealing with all non-land permanents. Con, they get to keep one thing. Con, it's not a permanent answer, as those things are back in their hand, coming back into play in the upcoming turns, right? But you're a mono blue player and you get what you get. We have more than you deserve within the phasing of Zalfar or Zalfir. 4 mana, read ahead. So this is a saga in which you can have it enter at any point, which is really cool within the lore counters. So 1, 2, or 3, which is really cool. So 1 and 2 are both the same, in which you can another target non-land permanent phases out, so you get to pick something, and then it won't phase in for as long as you control this saga, which is really cool. So it's gonna phase out until the third resolves, which is quite nice. So destroy all creatures. For each creature destroyed this way, its controller creates a 2/2 black Phyrexian creature. Phasing out your important creatures with this, and then destroying everything. Your creatures back in. They're going to be left with some issues, which is not bad. But a good way to deal with the majority of the field quite easily in mono blue here. Red has a lot of answers that are all damage based, right? And the festivities for 1, sorcery speed, dealing 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. Just hitting everything. It's fantastic, really cheap. Seismic Wave for 3, instant speed. Most field wipes are sorcery speed, so you get instant speed field interaction. It is very powerful and shouldn't be ignored. The wave will deal 2 damage to any target and then 1 damage to each non-token creature target opponent controls. So, pros, instant speed. Cons, non-artifact creatures. And there's a lot of those around. Moving on, Vampire's Vengeance. Again, with the trade-off for that instant speed interaction. And here, dealing 2 damage to each non-vampire creature, creating a blitz. So, there's a lot of vampires out there. You can cast it at instant speed, which is very fun, very good, incredibly powerful. But vampires, it might not be very consistent, right? The Elder Dragon War for 4. Again, a saga with read ahead, dealing 2 damage to each creature and each opponent. You get to discard and draw and then create a dragon afterwards as well. But the 2 damage to each creature and opponent seems to be fairly decent, considering you're going to get that extra value on the back end. We have Burn Down the House, one of my favorites. The utility here is high through the dual casting modes. You get to choose one of them at sorcery speed for 5, dealing 5 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. Right, 2 thumbs up from this guy. Or if you don't, you can act as a more aggressive player. Maybe you're using them as chump blockers, creating 3 devils with haste, and when they die, they'll deal 1 damage to any target, which is quite nice. Temporal Firestorm is a newer card. A little bit pricey, but the utility, again, is very high. 5 mana, originally sorcery speed. We can kick it twice for an additional 2 each time, choosing up to X creatures and or planeswalkers you control, where X was the number of times that you kicked this spell. Those permanents phase out, and then we'll deal 5 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. So, whether you want to phase out one of your creatures or planeswalkers to save them from the upcoming 5 damage that you're about to deal to everything. Really cool spell, right? So 7 and 9 mana, pretty pricey, but if you're protecting your things and cleaning up the entirety of the field, it comes at a premium, right? That's what we have to offer within red. Moving into black. Now, this is where we lost the removal, so perhaps some of the most important replacements for Meathook found here. Bloodline Calling for 3 instant speed. Creature tokens get -2/-2 into turn. So pros, instant speed. Trade-off, only creature tokens. However, the utility is nice here because we can, if not utilizing that, use its other mode. Target creature gets -5/-5 until the end of turn, which is going to remove anything. 3 mana, instant speed. Surprised it hasn't seen more play. I wonder whose fault that was. We have Choking Miasmia for 3, sorcery speed. All creatures get -2/-2 until the end of turn. You can take it for an additional 1 forest. Put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. Probably not great. Worth mentioning though. Malicious Malfunction for 3 as well. Sorcery speed. All creatures get -2/-2 until the end of turn. The creature would die this turn. Exile it instead. Okay, now we're talking. I like that exile effect a little bit more than the kicker for additional mana and then just the +1. Right. So I think they're both worth trying to mention everything, but the exile is very nice here. Sorry, underdog, get out of town. It deals with the sleeper. I like this Malicious Malfunction so far as a replacement. We have the Night Clubber for 3. This is a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, creatures your opponent control get -1/-1 till the end of turn. We can blitz it for an additional 3. Or not an additional 3, just 3. So it's your choice whether it enters with haste or not. If it does enter with haste, you'll sacrifice it for the draw, as the mechanic is. Not a kicker. You don't add them. They're separate casting costs, if I'm being unclear. Sometimes even I get confused. Moving on to the Path of Peril for 3. Sorcery speed, cleave for 6. So if we do pay that cleave cost, we get to ignore the words within the brackets. So destroy all creatures with mana value 2 or less for 3 mana. Destroy all creatures, ignore the brackets, for 6 mana. Yeah. So, very cheap. You can deal with things early on for 3 and now utilize it a little later for 6, which is more expensive than we want when we compare it to something like Depopulate, right? However, that's the premium you pay for the multiple modes, casting it earlier than Depopulate for 3, right? But then, a little later, 6. So I like it. I think that Path of Peril is a good contender as well. Drag to the bottom for 4 domain sorcery speed as well. Getting excited about this new mechanic. Each creature gets -X until the end of turn, where X is 1 plus the number of basic land types among lands you control. It's actually pretty good. A couple triomes, you're already at a full domain for 5, and then this is minus an additional 1 for -6/-6 with that full domain, which is pretty aggressive. Even if you're using a 3-color deck, you're still going to get -4 on all of the creatures, which is not bad. Again, I think a pretty good card. Maybe not the greatest in a mono black deck. You may want to try, one of these other cards that we have to offer if it was mono black, because then you'd be paying 4 for -2, and wouldn't you rather pay 3 for that same effect plus an exile of the graveyard or things that die? Right? So, there is a trade-off there, and you'll want to be just using this in multicolored decks, and the more colors, the better. We have Toxrill, worth mentioning. It's a creature, and then creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them, and at the beginning of each end step, your end step and your opponent's end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. So yeah, it's a problem. And now this, believe it or not, is the closest thing we can actually get to a Meathook. Why you say this? Well, it's going to wipe the field, plus provide additional value as it remains in play. We don't see that a lot. That's what made the Meathook so powerful. Obviously, the Meathook was much better as it was a life gain and damage engine. This will allow us to create creatures, which is not bad by any means, and then we can sacrifice those creatures to draw. So it's still providing value, maybe not as high of value. Like the damage is, that's like your end goal, right? So you're drawing cards, you're gaining value, getting creatures, doing damage, right? So there was an in between that we're doing with Toxrill that we didn't have to do really with the Meathook, right? So I think it's worth mentioning. It's not a big wipe all at once, but again, it's a good card, and it is going to help clean up the field at the end of the day, and that's what we're looking at. This is probably the saddest thing we're going to mention all day. Spinning Wheel Kick for 2+XX. Sorcery speed within green, ? Target creature You control deals damage equal to its power to each of X target creatures and or planeswalkers. Your assume opponents control, but it doesn't dictate that. So you could slay your own things if you wanted. Again, sorcery speed not great. You know, it's as good as you're gonna get mono green. Let's be real. Con, you're gonna need a ton of mana, right? You're hitting 2 creatures, so that's 6 mana. Right? It only goes up from there. You go to 8 for 3 creatures, right? It's just not super viable unless you have literally so many resources you don't know what to deal with. And you know, that's kind of mono green's thing, or green in general. And then finally, Karn's Silex for 3. It enters the battlefield tapped. Players can't pay life to cast spells or to activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. You pay X, tap it to destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X or less as a sorcery, which is pretty decent. Also, shutting down just planeswalker abilities in general. Going to shut down planeswalkers as it enters, and then you know as it leaves, it can potentially remove those planeswalkers, and you know also remove everything else. Pros: destroying each non-land permanent, so you know it's getting everything. Cons: it's a little slow coming in tap. They have a chance to remove it. Deals with planeswalkers, I guess yours and theirs. Good card. Probably see a lot more play now that Cheathook's gone. Corpse Explosion. We're getting into multicolor cards here for 3 sorcery speed as an additional cost to cast this spell. Exile a creature card from your graveyard. The explosion will deal damage equal to the exiled card's power to each creature and each planeswalker. Is pretty ridiculous. I'll scooch this in here. So you know this is going to hit everything: creatures and planeswalkers. Shouldn't say everything, you know, non-land on planeswalker things. You know what I mean. Enchantments and artifacts would still survive that weren't creature based. And then you also have to have as a con to not destroying everything, a card, creature specifically in your graveyard to exile. You know, so that's a thing. However, it's cheap. It's very cheap, 3 mana. Pretty cool. So, you know, maybe you're discarding or milling a mid-range based deck. Shoutouts to Toxeril, and that's maybe 7 damage to each creature and planeswalker. So in the right deck, an incredibly powerful card, but there's a couple stipulations that we'll have to meet before consider it just in willy-nilly like we did with Cheathook, right? Just, oh, we're running black, put her in there. We have Hitsugu Consumes All. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less as it enters. You're going to get to exile graveyards after and transform it into the Vessel of All Consuming, which is a very cool creature. So, a lot of value here, kind of like the Cheathook, I guess. Not too bad. I was saying that Toxtra was the only one, but Hitsugu is similar, kind of, sort of. Only 1 or less, so it's not getting everything. It's getting very little. Great against token decks. Let's be serious. And then you get that creature. So, it's worth mentioning. Moving on, we have the Incandescent Aria for 3 sorcery speed, 3 damage to each non-token creature. You see lots of things that are -2 to all tokens. Mana value 1 or less. This is kind of on the opposite side of that spectrum, dealing 3 damage to each non-token creature, which is pretty cool. So, it's giving the tokens a chance to strike back while wiping up the field. Hostile Takeover for 5. Grixis color, sorcery speed, choose up to 1 creature. It's going to have a base power and toughness of 1, and other, it'll have base power and toughness of 4, and then we'll deal 3 damage to each creature. So, that 4/4 will survive, that 1/1 will die. So, you're making one of your weaker creatures survive, you're making one of their stronger creatures die, which is pretty cool. So, fairly nice, hitting everything. Only 3 damage, not the greatest, and it's only creatures, not planeswalkers. So, again, we're really trying to build the deck around that, making sure that we have planeswalkers in the build, and just mitigating creatures, maintaining a growing number of walkers, right, and other forms of value. So this is what we have to replace our beloved Cheathook Massacre. It is gone in a couple of days here on the 13th, so that's this week. You'll see Cheathook Massacre leave Standard, which is pretty cool. It really is going to open up the meta, I believe. It's not just, like, I know we're looking at field wipes today, and people are comparing it to other field wipes. But it is also just an engine for two. We have to not forget that side of the meat hook. You could wipe the field, which was great, but you could even just play this for two. And now, whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses one life. Whenever a creature an opponent control dies, you're going to gain one life. And to me, it wasn't the hooking that was the problem. It was additional abilities here that really uh, narrowed what was viable to play competitively. It's just so easy to make token creatures, throw them in front of your meat hook while simultaneously gaining a 4-for-1 value wise. It's just everybody was using it. I believe that you know it's not. It's hard to say. Obviously, there are other issues within Mono Black, but if you were going to take something, what would you take? It's a hard answer. It's a hard question to answer. And I think, honestly, the Meat Hook's a good choice to just try to slow it down a little bit. Try to allow some room within the meta to change and shift and grow, where it's not just, we're running black and something else. Or we're specifically running a deck to beat that, like we see within the mono blue, right? So I don't mind the banning. I think it's all right. I know people on both sides of the fence. Don't hold back. Let me know what you think in the comments below if we haven't had a chance to speak yet. Again, just trying to make everyone familiar of the different options that they have available to themselves now that Meat Hook is gone to fulfill the role of cleaning up the field. Maybe doing that while trying to maintain some additional value along the side. And a lot of these cards do help us obtain that goal. So cheers. I hope you have an absolute magical day. Thanks for watching. Definitely check out my other videos. And a reminder that our YouTube members, Patreon supporters, and Twitch homeboys will gain early access to our YouTube content. Very cool. And our Untapped profile. So you can see all of the videos early and get access to all of the decks stats literally live as I'm playing them, which is really cool. So hit me up in the Discord if you've done so, and I'll get you added to the VIP chat if it doesn't automatically add. And of course, everybody just have a magical day, whether you have the financial ability to support or not. Your time and attention is worth quite a bit as well. So I really do appreciate that. Catch you guys soon in the next. Take care.